Okay, your ego is looking better too. You're mostly down to the shadow and having to resolve that fully. In body, I'm also. So it's a constant thing. But like as you get stronger and you detox and you starve the parasites that are attached to it and all the other stuff, because it's kind of. Did I tell you about the shadow body before? The shadow in uh, psychology with Carl Jung, we'll go into the place we put all our self-defeating aspects into a box, and then it's like the lack of light aspect, and it's pretty true. There's more depth to it, but yeah, everything you hate about yourself or the world will be in that, and then there will be an overlay with your entire body. So there will be a shadow to your heart, your head, your mind, your ego, all the things, and then so you can muscle test through what aspect of the shadow would be bleeding over as coming up as a problem and some other things. Then it would be to like, so to make it simple for yourself, you can be like, I'll draw my body in front of me and that, or a person, and then you tune into like the things of interest where they are through the body. So there will be the body, the field of the shadow, any if it's extended out, attached to anything, and you'd also observe, make your timeline. You'd mark the dates and then tune into what points anything is attaching to your shadow and bleeding something in. The shadow will be kind of pure at the beginning of life, and then especially at age 9, and sometimes there'll be any wounds or all that, and ego survival stuff will also bleed over. But you look into how many windows there are into your shadow, and then start closing all those windows so that nothing can attach or add to it or steal energy from or anything else. And then you whittle down the problems of the shadow until you can more and more purify and then get it in strength and strongness, because it's been abused and haunted to the level where it's the most self-defeating aspect of our multidimensional bodies usually. But it's not in its origin supposed to be like that. If you were to see it like each of our layers of body, like the fire body, earth, void, ether, light, dreaming, all that, like way anciently before this planet, see all those bodies like start as a species, and they would just start with one, and they would bring that species, that technology to its fullest. And as those experiences advanced, eventually there are groups of souls that wanted to bring them together in one suit, or skin technology. And then eventually this culminates in this experiment, which is the merging of the species into a super hybrid that has all these body technologies. So we inherited the shadow technology. People, if you want to look up the term for shadow people, that's the species. People had like shadows like come to them and like see them in the room and like as a kid and stuff. They're not really dark. Some of them are. A lot of them have been abused to be that way, but they're mostly neutral if they're not dominated. And then the aspect that the Anunnaki introduced through their DNA and adding to the chromosome 2, they brought in that shadow DNA, which then through like a shapeshifter shadow being that learned how to make a physical body, and then they they kind of tortured it and stole its DNA. So that one's, so you can also in your shadow, when you're tracking back your shadow DNA introduction through the Anunnaki, it'll go back to like that introduced being, and a lot of the darkness will bleed over from the drama of what that's got, dealing with it until it resolves its imprisonment thing going on. And then also still loving detachment and quarantine that way, even though, you know, and I've done some things with that, but I think it needs a large amount of unity from a lot of people to fully resolve everything it's got going on in wounds, because a lot of it lacks a lot of wholeness, and then its parts will be abused by the different beings that are trying to utilize that tech. And the, tech, when it's in its good state, will be able to do a lot of things like smoke screen, turning invisible, going out of phase, making shadow copies, teleporting. There's some of the things that the shadow beings learn how to do. But you know that now it's not going to be able to do that until you've purified it, and it's one of the last things that you would purify. And since you're doing well in most of the other things, that it's a good to like now work on this. Yeah, so a lot of it will be detaching any first steps, which may take a few days. I mean, depending on how many windows and things attach to you, and you being able to resolve and being a light that a lot of things are attracted to. So a lot of it's like detaching everything else's shadow to your shadow, and then quarantining it, making traps. Purifying it, because then it will have a lot of self-defeating qualities. It will be the aspect of you that like contains like dark qualities from your darkest self bleeding over. So you'll be detaching, make your timeline for this life and other lives and your DNA, which will be mostly bleeding over at age 9, but you would do it slowly, write it down, because you know all this is a little overwhelming. Start monitoring with muscle testing and all the like how many connections are there, more 1 2 3, until like it drops. You detach everyone else from start with this life, detach all everyone else, all the windows that they get in, narrow down the windows to like age 9 and the other things. Then you would, once everyone else in the wounds of that your timeline are detached, you then like see is anything bleeding over from past lives or the DNA, and it's usually at the age 9. You would for me, a lot of my darkest selves would bleed over and they would completely attach to my shadow, and then essentially start bringing the qualities from those lives to this live's shadow. And if you were to go into a room in your mind and ask for your shadow and your ego to appear, they're very easy at talking with you, so they'll totally appear, and it might be something scary and all that, but that's the kind of mode of consciousness they're in, where they're in survival and needing to be something scary against all the things that are attacking them, and having to raise up to that level of protection for themselves. And but you know, when as you purify them and resolve the you can either fully detach those dark selves from your shadow, while also resolving that past life as an entanglement trap, but you ultimately want to get it off you so it doesn't affect this life, but still being able to resolve it, because it's like a version of you that's crying out in pain to some version in time you that is capable of helping it. And then you'll be able to bring its drama down to 0 as best it can as you raise it up into light. And sometimes there will be other ones bleed over, because it will be like in a process of like what you're ready for. So you'll work on one, and then eventually another one will show up. So if anything that's like self-defeating and like pain and all that, a lot of it will be narrowed down to the shadow and like, oh, what's bleeding over? And then you can like, is it this life, past lives, or DNA? So like with DNA, you'll be like looking at the lineage of the shadow beings, the ancestors having to do with that. It will be mostly through the connection of that one that was captured by the Anunnaki and then manipulates DNA. So like fully quarantine and detach that, while like being able to bring it to peace with you so that it doesn't want to take your energy. And then anything in the lineage connected to that, some of the connected DNA lineage might know who you are, but you know, always loving attachment, but there's some things you could trade and learn from them. And when you receive stuff from dark or shadowish beings, always audit the crap out of it, quarantine it for a while, and what they give you, and then like kind of pick out the stuff that's good and out the stuff that's bad, and keep the stuff that's good. Don't really integrate it. Have like reflect in the better version of this tech that you have within, and like do a thing with source where you let go of the external tech and you embrace the, because once you achieved and got the external version, if like you weren't earning it internally before, you can earn by letting it go and then proving that you're not an egoic, like power driven being, that you will embrace the internal version that's infinite and that will be strong. And then once it's you've detached everything, then it's a finite problem. Nothing's really, well, I'm not going to say, sometimes you'll wake up and like be way more strong and be like, oh, now you're ready to handle this. But in general, you'd be working up to with like sometimes a little bit like more weight put on your shoulders, but like always still advancing in it, to the point where you will want to do like big 5 elemental clearing: fire, earth, water, and then spirit. And then if it's like a big problem and you're like a more advanced spirit, sometimes like divinity energy will be involved in the purification. But you in the level of what you're dealing with, you'll be able to monitor when you've earned that fully. I think you specifically, but this is for anyone else doing it. Then you'll be like building it up like it's a body, and you'd be like seeing like any other body that you're building up, like the light body, the dreaming body, all the other stuff. You want to start with the root and see if it's well grounded, well protected, shielding. I'll name a few. Grounded in survival, resilience, camouflage, defense, offense, protection, interaction with other root aspects of body, fear processing, decoys, distractions, loving detachment, material magic, pretty much all the root stuff, like 33 branches plus. It's like definitely plus, but what will people start with, I recommend. And yeah, sometimes it will ask for like your power will like, you know, how we talked about where sometimes in the morning, if you want more energy, you ask your power in your solar plexus, which may be like some representation of a life that you achieved a lot of power, like a dragon self. And you ask that power version aspect of you, oh, what can I do in unity with you that you'll empower me? And it won't empower you unless you do what it wants to do first. So otherwise it'll be like a lazy sleeping dragon and not like do anything for you. If it's like, well, you good luck with that one. But if you're wanting to help me with this, then I'll help you. So that, and you can like interview like, oh, what does it want to spend its power on? Sometimes will be, you know, we talked about that a little bit before. It will want to spend it on freedom or will or force magic or clearing or purification, destruction of something it's angry at, or even things like the ego death or shadow death, which is not a death, it's a purification and bringing to wholeness. And yeah, sometimes we'll ask for that, and you like a lot of the times there'll be things having to do with the shadow, and now your defenses are pretty high up to where you've narrowed down the problems to mostly just the shadow, sometimes the ego, but the ego will be that other layer around it that protects you from the shadow, and sometimes the shadow will bleed into it and then make it self-defeating, and then shatty when it's overwhelmed. So yeah, and you can monitor how to make it easy. You can be like, oh, after you've purified and all that, and you're building it up, root, sacral, solar of the shadow. You'd be like, oh, how many branches am I into, and how many do I need for what I'm dealing with? Like if you were to reach 10 out of 10 with the amount of drama coming in daily at your shadow, and then you'd want to raise above it so that the amount you're able to protect your shadow so that it doesn't get any more incursion, and you're slowly making it nicer and better, and then you can bring back its true abilities online, and it doesn't have to steal. Eventually the goal is, it's nice, it doesn't do self-defeating aspects to you, it doesn't allow things to harm you or pain, it's able to protect you, resolve stuff in the shadow world, which this world has a lot of things. People, their shadow is uncontrollable, and they can't do they can't stop it, and it'll harm their relations with other people. But so anytime you interact with another person, their shadow might try to attach and all this other stuff. But you eventually want it to where it doesn't have all that stuff, and it's not draining energy from you, and it can eventually produce its own energy, and then it doesn't need to steal from you, and nothing else will hack into it to use its body to steal from you, and usually connect in the solar plexus. The shadows, when I like track back, oh, what's the problem today? And it's like, if it goes to the root, that will be where the shadows category is usually. But also the next biggest thing I usually tune into with the shadow is the shadow of the ego, which is in the solar plexus. And then anything else like pain, the pain body the shadow of your pain body kind of thing. The best things to do for the shadow are facing it, talking to it, interviewing it, asking what it wants, and then what its secret desire is, and sometimes it doesn't know, or it's at the core of it, like the lack of love or whatever. And then you can figure out what it needs, mostly love. So you hug it and kind of transmute it and shrink down all it's dealing with in emotions, because a lot of emotions will go through the shadow. And loving detachment, because sometimes it's like got a lot of stuff and you want to kind of detach it from everything else in your body and quarantine that problem down. And then, getting it to detach from everything else while detaching, like a loving detachment bubble around it. So you get it out of interacting with it, you quarantine everything else down to that, then everything attached to it, getting it to loving detach while you're detaching from it, from everything. And then sometimes, the ego shadow death concept, which is mostly just starving it of the predators attached to it off from stealing any of your energy through whatever means that is. Most of the things that fuel the shadow are shadow deeds. You'll definitely know what those are. And then urges, things that the shadow wants,